Welcome to our Candidates Accountability Session tonight. I'm Susan Eagle, the minister at Grace United Church, and I welcome you to this space. When you arrived, you should have received a candidate's questions handout. Can you indicate if anyone doesn't have one? This has been put together by the coalition of groups that are co-sponsoring and hosting tonight, and there's a background for each of the questions. So we want to make sure that you have that. Also, I want to mention that we are live streaming tonight, so candidates, moderator, you will only be heard on live stream if you are speaking into a microphone. So we do have some folks who have joined us on the live stream. And finally, I want to welcome our moderator this evening. Claudine Cousins is the CEO of Empower Simcoe. She teaches at the School of Business at Georgian College, a local advocate of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we feel very privileged to have her here with us tonight. So we welcome her, we welcome our candidates.
Thank you, and before I start, I must disclose, I haven't been to church this week. And I feel now my mom's eyes on me, saying, I brought you up better than this, Claudine. And I will make up for it on Sunday. So thank you, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the space. We thank our church for allowing us to meet here today for the Barrie-Springwater-Oro-Medonte Candidates Accountability Assembly. It's quite a mouthful, but it's really important for us to hear from our candidates. So it's an opportunity for voters to hear from the candidates on a few important items and issues that are really dear to our heart here in our area, and also to be able to get the right information that you need in order to vote, right? Without the right information, you can't vote, and without a vote, you have no voice. Without a voice, you can't complain, right? So if you didn't vote, don't complain, right? Because you have to look in the mirror first. So I just want to say thank you to our host, the Grace United Church. It's not always easy to find space, so we welcome them and thank them for allowing us to be here today. I also want to acknowledge our supporting partner groups, the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, as some of us call SCADA, Simcoe County Poverty Reduction Task Group, the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, the Simcoe County Food Council, and Kairos. So in terms of the process, I'm just going to move right into it, right? So questions, we're going to have questions from the audience that will be collected in the first half of the program. However, there's some rules of conduct, okay? So for all of us, first remember we're in church. Civil conversation, really important. Respectful. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a question. Please be respectful. And then, of course, no defamatory comments. No four-letter words that we couldn't say in front of our grandmother or 2-year-olds, right? So I think if we keep that in mind, we will have a really good session and be able to hear and also voice our opinions. So in terms of how it's going to work, I will introduce each of the 3 discussion pillars. So in your information package, you'll notice that the way this is set up, there are 3 separate buckets, I would call it. And I'm going to ask the candidates 2 to 3 questions for each of those buckets. And they will have 3 minutes maximum. And anyone remember the Gong Show? Or maybe the hook? Yeah, we're going to give them the gong or the hook to say, time. When the 3 minutes are up, in order for them to answer the question and then expand on what they mean to a yes or no answer. And we're going to start with introductions, 2 minutes each from the candidates about themselves. And we're going to start with number 1.
That would be me. Thank you for this opportunity to have these really important conversations for our community. As you can tell by the sign, I'm Beverly Patchell. I'm going to tell you a bit about myself to get started. I was born and raised in Elmvale and was really fortunate to have a great childhood in a really strong and healthy community. I started working in Barrie at a bank directly out of school and worked in the loans and the mortgage department for most of my 12 years of banking. And during those years, I heard from working families and small businesses as far as their day-to-day challenges, and in good times as well as times of high inflation and high interest rates. I also witnessed the devastation to communities when jobs left the area and businesses closed. During those years, I married, was blessed with 2 children, and we built a home in the Moonstone, Mount St. Louis area. I joined the County of Simcoe's Social Assistance Department in 1992 when welfare rates were at an all-time high. It was heartbreaking to see families who'd built a good life moving to social assistance and, as a result, losing everything that they'd worked for. In those 18 years, there were a few lessons that I learned along the way, the most significant being you can't make Ontario work if there are no decent, stable, full-time jobs or community access to the necessary supports and services. This motivated me to become really active in my union, creating and delivering campaigns to challenge rate reductions, lost benefits, punitive policies, and privatization of public services. After a decade of this activism, my union hired me, and in my years working for the Canadian Union of Public Employees, I came to have a solid understanding and the ability to challenge provincial legislation, regulation, and funding, because this was vital to my assignment in supporting workers and supporting strong public services. All of these experiences have brought me here to you today, seeking your support to send me to Queen's Park as your member of provincial parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank our hosts for inviting me here tonight. My name is Elise Robinson, and I am your Green Party candidate. Some of you may be wondering what this 22-year-old is doing up here, and my best explanation I can give you is that I've never been one to blindly accept things as they are. You see, when I was 5 years old, I successfully drafted my first petition. At the time, my school wouldn't let the kindergartners play with soccer balls or basketballs or tennis balls, and I, being who I am, would not let that stand. So I got out my crayons and a piece of green construction paper and went around to all the kids in my class to ask them to scribble their names as best as they could on my petition. Then I took it to my principal and pled my case. The next day, I scored my first ever goal in soccer. Obviously, the issues this province faces cannot be solved with crayons and construction paper, but the reason I'm telling you this story is because you are never too young or too inexperienced to create change. If you know how to actively listen, how to identify where the gaps are, and how to work as hard as you can for the communities you want to represent, then you can build a better world. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. The issues we face today are not isolated incidents caused by one bad policy. They are symptoms of a broken system, a system built for the profits of some over the well-being of us all. I wholeheartedly believe that I can help build a better system, but I won't promise you that I have all of the answers. No one can truthfully make that promise. But I can promise to always listen and to do everything I can to create the Ontario that you want. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a delight to be back here at Grace United Church. I'm Jeff Lehman. I used to be the mayor. I'm actually on leave. I took an unpaid leave to do this because I am fully committed to running to represent you as your MPP for Barrie-Springwater-Oro-Medonte. And 4 years ago, I stood here on this stage for a speaker series where we talked about the issues we were talking about tonight. We talked about the root causes and the fact that we have built government in this province to respond to problems rather than help people before they fall into crisis. And that's one of the major issues we're going to talk about tonight. There are two very important words that I want to talk about in our responses this evening. One is dignity, and the second is sustainability. You've heard the Liberal Party in our platform, which was released on Monday, talk about economic dignity, how people have a right to live with dignity, and how we unfortunately have built a system, and we've seen exacerbated by COVID, divisions in our society that have grown deeper. People are struggling, and we need our public services to do better to support them. I believe the election that is coming very soon is going to be a choice between a party or parties that believe in public services and a government that does not, that sees them as a cost center to cut for other priorities. I believe in public services. That's why I'm running. I had the privilege of leading this community for 12 years and trying to build us up, trying to treat those root causes, and treat all of our residents with dignity and build a more sustainable community. And that's what I want to do as part of an Ontario government. So that's why I want to be your MPP, and I'm delighted that Grace United and this coalition of organizations is bringing these very important issues in front of us tonight. I'm looking forward to answering your questions, and thank you again for organizing it.
So just want to remind the candidates once again that they'll have 3 minutes to state a yes or no to the questions, and then expand on their answers with some details about their planned approach to the issue. Okay, so we're going to kick it right off. So the first bucket, poverty reduction. Imagine that, right? So as agencies working with low-income households regularly here, people are struggling. They're having to make tough choices. And, you know, the decision to pay your rent or buy food it's no choice at all. So charities have stepped in to help bridge that gap. However, I think we are all in agreement that the solution is increasing income. While the cost of living is going up dramatically, I don't think I have to tell anyone here how much it costs to rent anything in Barrie and Simcoe County. And the costs have continued to go up exponentially. One of the things that we need to consider is Ontario Works and ODSP rates. These have been frozen since 2018. However, as I said, costs have continued to go up. The maximum benefit for a single adult is $914 a month, or $10,963 a year. And that includes everything, includes the tax credits. For a single adult relying on ODSP, it's $1,350 a month, or $16,195 for the year. That means more than 843,000 Ontarians are living in deep poverty, well below the Ontario poverty line. So, you know, we want government programs to lift people out of poverty and give them options. So my 3 questions for number 1, we're starting with number 1 again. Will you commit to increasing the Ontario Works and ODSP rates so that everyone relying on social assistance has enough income to live above the poverty line and index the rates to the cost of living?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and expand.
Okay. My apologies. This is my first time.
No need to apologize.
Okay. People who rely on social assistance should be able to count on receiving enough support to live healthy lives and count on a program that gets them out of poverty. Our community cannot continue to put more and more responsibility on the social safety net or on charities. Ontario's NDP will establish a system that raises people out of poverty no later than the end of our first term. We will immediately start working with stakeholders on delivering evidence-based research to set rates at a level that recognizes the real costs of essentials like food and rent. Our goal is to establish OW and ODSP rates to a level that lifts everybody out of poverty by the end of their first term. That's going to begin with a rate increase of 20%, and we will legislate that rate to a minimum that must be indexed to inflation.
Thank you.
So yes, the Green Party does commit to this, and is the only party that promises to double the ODSP and OW rates so no one has to live in legislated poverty. We would also immediately update the accessibility standards in the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act to mandate universal design so all new housing is accessible. And it's important that we build policies that reflect the various and intersectional needs of people living with disabilities. And part of addressing those intersectional needs is increasing high-quality home care options for people with disabilities, as well as expanding access to mental health care options for people on ODSP, which is why we will extend access to mental health care under OHIP, remove HST from the costs of care provided by psychotherapists, and provide an immediate base budget increase of 8% to the community mental health sector. And taking an intersectional approach also means providing cultural responsiveness training that is trauma-informed and rooted in anti-racism understanding for all healthcare professionals so people with disabilities are not discriminated against when receiving the care they need.
Thank you.
Thanks. And the answer is yes. And for those who have followed the Liberal platform, you will know that we've committed to a 20% increase for ODSP and 10% for OW. Now, that's not enough to say yes to this question for those who are holding us accountable, and I want to be accountable for that. The reason I'm saying yes is this. In addition, we've committed to 10 paid sick days, a package of portable health and mental health and wellness benefits that will move with workers. But the specific question is about income. And the reason I'm saying yes is because we're also proposing to reintroduce the Basic Income Pilot Project. And the reason the commitment was for 2 years, and there's been some discussion of this since our platform was released, is because we wish to move forward with that Basic Income Pilot. If we do that, then we are very confident that we can lift Ontarians out of poverty. But the immediate commitment is, as I mentioned, 10% on OW, 20% on ODSP, Basic Income Pilot, 10 paid sick days, and a series of other measures, all of which you can read about in our platform, which is online.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that response, and we will remember. Our second question, and we're going to start at the far end with you, Jeff. Will you commit to increasing the minimum wage to reflect the actual cost of living indexed to the cost that we see going up every single day?
Yes, and I'm pleased to say that long before we put out our platform, we put out our thoughts on what we call economic dignity, and this is why I talked about it in the introduction. A key and central plank to that for our party is a commitment to a living wage. We're proposing to calculate that on a regional basis to take account of the fact that in some regions a living wage that's set for one level won't be enough, and in others it would be more than the calculated living wage. Many of you will know that living wage is calculated regionally across the province, and that is something that the Liberal Party is committed to. So we have committed to an immediate increase in the minimum wage to $16, but to bring in a living wage which is regionally based.
Thank you.
Yes. I am also committed to a continuous increase in the minimum wage to reflect the actual cost of living. However, this must be coupled with clamping down on the drastic increase in housing, food, and energy costs, which is why I'll implement a farmers' code of conduct aimed at protecting farmers, local food producers, and consumers so we can rely less on price gouging box stores and instead make it easier and cheaper for people to support their local farmers. And it's also why I'll implement a province-wide multiple home speculation tax, as well as increase the vacant home tax to 20% to reduce rampant speculative demand in the housing market. And regarding energy, I will provide homeowners with a green retrofit grant of $15,000 to $20,000 to cover costs for things like heat pumps and improved insulation.
Thank you.
So, with the NDP platform, the answer is yes. Specifically on the minimum wage, there'll be an increase immediately to $16. After consultation with stakeholders, we've established an incremental increase to allow the community to adjust to the increase in staffing costs. So we're looking at a $1 increase again, May 1st, 2023, And then in each year of our term, there will be an additional $1, so that the rate will be $20 as of May 1st, 2026. Meanwhile, we'll work with stakeholders to determine how best to index the minimum wage after that to ensure that it maintains its purchasing value. But another really important piece to this is to make sure that life is affordable for people. So in our platform, we're talking about universal dental care, universal pharmacare, and mental health treatment where you don't have to use your credit card. You can use your OHIP card. In addition to affordable housing, which I'm going to talk about in our next pillar. So it's a holistic approach in our platform. You'll see that I have cards outside that I invite you to pick up on your way out that will explain how all of these pieces come together to create a program that will help make life more affordable and fix what's broken for Ontarians. Thank you.
Thank you. So the final question under this pillar is, and we'll start in the middle this time, will you commit to creating and implementing a comprehensive poverty reduction strategy for Ontario, including advocating for a basic income guarantee at the federal level?
Absolutely. The Greens are 100% committed to creating and implementing a comprehensive poverty reduction strategy that includes working with the federal government to create a universal basic income guarantee. UBI specifically is something that the Greens have been advocating for many years now, and I really do believe that since the pandemic began, more and more people are starting to understand why. But I do want to make it clear that UBI is not the only solution. Much of the poverty that exists today is due to systemic barriers that have been in place for a very long time. To get to the heart of the issue, we need to start by decommodifying affordable housing and nutritious food and recognize it for what it is, a human right. Until we start creating policy through that lens, investors will continue to thrive while the rest of us suffer. I won't stand around and continue to let that happen.
Thank you. Okay, we'll come back up here.
Okay. Yes. We will commit to restarting the basic income pilot that was prematurely canceled and continue to weigh in on innovative approaches to social assistance. As I'd indicated earlier, we will begin a comprehensive review of all of the aspects of income support, and in order to fully recognize what the essential costs are and where the gaps are. There needs to be an overhaul of Ontario's broken social assistance program. This is really long overdue. And so to do this, it's got to be an undertaking that's accomplished through meaningful consultation and co-design with the stakeholders, which include social assistance clients.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yes, of course, and I'd go so far as to say there are some components of such a strategy in our platform, of course, and I really appreciated Lisa's answer, actually, because this, if it is to be a comprehensive poverty reduction strategy, we cannot talk about that without talking about the much broader and systemic issues of housing, of cost of living, of food, of employment, of transportation, all of the costs which are keeping people in poverty and perpetuating the cycles of poverty. Buck a ride might sound like a gimmick line, but I'll tell you the impact that can have in terms of reducing transportation costs for people who rely on and choose public transport is enormous, and it's very significant for our region in terms of access to jobs and so forth. But you can't talk about a comprehensive poverty reduction strategy without talking about those root causes, and I'm so passionate about this. This is work that was very important to me as mayor. Because if we don't tackle and give people the assistance with the services that they need, whether that is mental health or addictions or health care that is wellness-driven, mental health care, then we are not going to be able to provide a comprehensive response to poverty. The housing situation we're going to talk about next, and I have a lot to say on that one too, but I will tell you unequivocally on this. The answer is yes. I referenced earlier that we have put right in the platform our commitment to restarting the Basic Income Pilot Project and our commitment to a living wage. So it's not only income support, but more broadly, I hope as you read our plans and in our platform, you will see that approach which targets the root causes for so many individuals of poverty.
Thank you. You know, it's good to hear that our candidates see the link between poverty and homelessness. And, you know, we all remember Maslow's hierarchy. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't have a house, you don't have a roof over your head, all the other things fall apart, right? So it's good to hear that our candidates are on that same wavelength. So our second pillar is housing and homelessness. So one of the most important issues out here right now, everywhere, is housing. Not just housing affordability, you know, but actual supply of housing. So we have first-time buyers who can't get into the market, struggling to pay their rent, and who may not even have housing at all. You know, they're on the streets and they're living precariously. So there are over 735,000 Ontario households who cannot access a home that they can afford. And, you know, or housing that needs such huge amounts of repair that they're living just in a way that no one should be living. So deeply affordable housing options are needed now. The County of Simcoe staff has told all of us that the rent supplement, a program that Empower Simcoe helps to apply to individuals, that this doesn't receive funding from the province that is sufficient to meet the needs within our community. We also have the government who needs to take action to not only talk policy, but build to protect and support deeply affordable community housing. We know it takes time, but you have to start and you have to move forward. So also there's a backlog. There are backlog of cases amongst landlord and tenants. So if you think about the landlord and tenant board, previously you could go in person and you could deal with your issues. It's all gone online, and that has created a huge backlog for those who are trying to access housing. So by 3 questions. So we'll start down at the bottom this time. Will you commit to implementing a strategy to end chronic homelessness, not surface, chronic homelessness, with clear and measurable targets, timelines, and investment that includes not only long-term, but emergency? When something happens, somebody is not living precariously.
Unequivocally, yes. And we saw this morning on our waterfront an excellent awareness initiative to try and help bring this home to our community, just what the impact will look like if the Ford government cuts off support for homelessness services at the end of June, as is currently the situation. And thank you for those who are involved in bringing that forward in such a clear and dramatic way. We are committed in our platform, the party, to first of all restarting the homelessness census, which was one of many initiatives canceled, of course, 4 years ago. We're committed to 138,000 deeply affordable homes, but the key piece in that I was so proud of when we brought forward our platform is 38,000 units of supportive housing. If we go back a little while, when we converted, listen to me, when Redwood Park and the David Busby Street Centre worked very hard, supported by the city and the county, to convert Bars Motel to supportive housing, which is now Lucy's Place, that is the best approach we can possibly bring. That is both an emergency solution to some extent, but a long-term solution. By surrounding people, by wrapping them with the services they need, we're not only providing safe and affordable housing in a community setting, but we are giving people the assistance they need on site. That's a wonderful project. We need a lot more of it, but we couldn't get this provincial government to invest in it, and that is very, very frustrating. I believe that supportive housing is the single best answer to this, but implementing a strategy to end chronic homelessness, as I said at the beginning and in my opening remarks, one of the reasons I'm running is I believe so strongly that we've built government to react to problems, to deliver emergency services, to help you once you fall or once you're sick or once you're in crisis. We need to prevent people getting there in the first place, give them the proper supports, give them what they need in terms of wellness services, mental health supports. And this means moving upstream. And that's why a strategy to end chronic homelessness is an education strategy. It is a mental health strategy. It is an income and economic strategy. It is an employment and a healthcare piece. That's what comprehensive means. And I've had the good fortune to be able to work with many of the people in our community who are delivering those components and to try and bring them together through initiatives like the Barrie Health Accord. And that's what I believe we need to do in government. But specifically, the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to this and the supportive housing approach. The last piece I'll mention is housing first. On the emergency side and on the shelter support, we're committed to specific dollar amounts, all of which are laid out in our fully costed platform, both for housing first supports and a commitment to the shelter system.
Thank you.
It is crucial that we immediately implement a strategy to end chronic homelessness. And that has to start with housing, which is why I pledged to build 60,000 supportive housing units by creating partnerships with public, private, and nonprofit housing organizations. But I want to stress how important it is that these housing projects have on-site supports for the people living within them, like psychologists, addiction support specialists, and employment service workers. Regarding emergency solutions, the Greens believe the province should fund 50% of shelter and community housing costs while still allowing municipalities to maintain management control. We also pledge to increase funding for emergency women's shelters, as well as transitional and permanent supportive housing for women and their families at risk that is safe, accessible, and culturally appropriate. I also will work with the federal government to decriminalize drug use and shift funding from the justice system into healthcare, so those struggling with both homelessness and addiction are cared for, not criminalized. And because the drug poisoning crisis disproportionately affects homeless populations, I will expand safe consumption sites, because it truly is life or death.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Ontario NDP has a comprehensive plan to deal with this crisis. We believe housing is a human right, and we can see that this is an urgent matter in our community. Our Homes You Can Afford plan contains the concrete, doable actions that make sure everybody has a safe place to sleep, as well as access to supportive and affordable transitional and permanent housing. Some highlights of that are, we'll implement the Ontario Nonprofit Housing Association and Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada's plan to build 69,000 new and affordable homes, extend the life of 260,000 affordable homes, help 311,000 households, pay the rent by the creation of a portable housing benefit. This will assist tenants who can't afford to pay the rent in addition to the basic needs for themselves and their families. We know there's an urgent need for supportive housing. We are committed to the delivery of 30,000 new homes with supports in the next 10 years.
Thank you. Now, the second question is, you've all touched on this already, but there's a piece in there that I think is worthy of you responding to. So the question is, will you commit to building and acquiring homes which are deeply affordable? Nonprofit homes, co-ops, supporting housing as part of a broad spectrum of supply-based housing to address the crisis and also reinvest in existing community housing. We have community housing now, and it needs a lot of repair and ongoing renewal. So will you commit to that and also commit to an ongoing funding for rental assistance? So you touched on it, but I want to talk about some of those specific examples. We'll start here with you. If you have anything else to say. If you don't, then that's fine.
I'm not in a position to drill down into the program that I had mentioned earlier regarding the plan for Ontario's Nonprofit Housing Association and Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada. I am willing to commit that I would get that information to anybody who wants to leave their name with me at my desk. I think I probably went ahead and answered the question earlier, didn't I?
And that's fine. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Yes, absolutely. I am committed to building homes that are deeply affordable, starting with 100,000 permanently affordable rental units. I will also create a seed fund of $100 million for cooperative housing through direct funding and mortgage support, provide low-interest loans via a new revolving fund for affordable housing, and provide $2 billion for nonprofit and co-op retrofits. I also plan to repair 260,000 community housing units over the next decade in partnership with the federal government under the National Housing Strategy. And I am committed to protecting renters by reinstating rent controls on all units to regulate rental increases year to year and to protect tenants from being unfairly priced out of their homes. This must be coupled with establishing an effective control system that limits rent increases between tenancies, gets rid of incentives for landlords to drive out long-standing tenants in order to increase rent, and strengthens penalties for landlords who engage in bad faith evictions, such as rent evictions. And I will adequately fund Legal Aid Ontario to support tenants who are wrongfully evicted, face discrimination, or have been forced into unsafe living conditions.
Thank you. And you?
Thank you very much. Yeah, there is a lot in this question, and there is a lot in the housing crisis. Beware anybody who tells you, politician or otherwise, that this is a simple issue that doesn't require many years and complicated factors to respond to. There are a lot of people peddling easy solutions out there that often are supported by their interests. We've had 4 housing supply action plans from this government, and we are where we are today, shorter on supply of affordable housing than we have ever been in the province of Ontario. The question specifically asked about the supply-based approach. In our platform, I've mentioned our commitment is to 138,000 deeply affordable homes, but I want to talk about what we're actually going to do differently to accomplish that, because that's what you should be asking of anybody who is offering solutions to the housing crisis right now. What are you going to do differently? Because things need to be much more, change needs to be much more fundamental. We can't be tinkering with municipal processes and those sorts of things. Our big proposal is to create what's called will be called the Ontario Housing Corporation, to finance and build new affordable homes for first-time buyers and to invest in rental housing. It is a substantially larger role for the Ontario government. We have watched this government, especially in this community, fail to act, and we are seeing the consequences of it, not just in the private sector, in the market, but in the deep shortage of affordable rental and the backlog on our wait list for social housing. So our commitments are laid out and they are costed in our platform. We are telling everybody what our commitments are going to cost, but I will tell you this, that if we keep doing things the way we have been doing them, we are not going to solve a housing market which is underbuilding supply. The other key piece I wanted to mention is something that I'm really proud to have contributed to the Liberal platform. We're going to introduce what we're calling a use it or lose it tax. So if a developer gets units approved and they don't build them within a time period, probably 3 years, they will start to pay an additional tax on that land that they're banking and not building. We have something in the order of 500,000 unbuilt units in Ontario because the development community has not proceeded for one reason or another. That's not okay. We have enough units on the books approved by cities and towns across this province to substantially reduce the price of housing and create far more rental apartments. Now, you know that I've tried to do a lot of work on this as mayor. I believe the solutions are to build homes that are affordable for people. That doesn't mean more sprawl into the White Belt and into the countryside. It does mean building the missing middle, building more rental apartments, purpose-built rental apartments, and I believe our platform is showing concrete steps on how we're going to do that. Pardon the pun.
Thank you. So the final question in this platform goes back to the Landlord and Tenant Board. So, as I said before, there is a long, long list of people waiting to see and bring their case forward. So will you commit to ensuring there is sufficient capacity at the Landlord and Tenant Board so that cases can be heard quickly and are easily accessible? Start with you in the middle.
Yes, and I'll do so by increasing the board's funding to hire additional adjudicators and add transparency to the appointment process, and repeal changes made in Bill 184, which would bring back stronger board oversight of payment agreements between landlords and tenants. I'll also allow tenants to bring group applications to the board to make requests for building repairs and maintenance to help reduce the backlog. And finally, I'll reverse the planned changes that would see hearings move from in-person to online by default, because barriers to accessing technology should never be a barrier to accessing justice.
Thank you. Down here.
Thank you. Yes, this is a no-brainer, and I wish the Attorney General was here to answer this question too, because let me tell you, properly funding the justice system, properly funding things like the Landlord and Tenant Board are not expensive things to do. It is difficult to work through a backlog of cases, there's no question, but how do you get a backlog of cases? By underfunding a system. And it is fundamentally unfair and contributing to the housing crisis for the system to be in the shape it's in. When our party was in government, we introduced a simplified standardized lease, and we took some other initiatives, including rent control. And we are proposing additional steps, and again, I won't lay them all out. There's 14 pages of housing initiatives in our platform, and I really do hope you'll give it a chance, I'll give it a read, because there are so many different pieces in there. But if both landlords and tenants can't rely on the system to be prompt and fair, ultimately, the bigger impact of that is fewer rental units and more abuse by landlords of tenants. If the system does not exist to protect them in a timely manner, then the situations continue. And the situations that end up the Landlord and Tenant Board are often the reasons why both tenants and landlords end up ceasing to do what they're doing. So this one is a no-brainer, yes, and I might have a slightly different view than Elise on the accessibility piece. I believe there should be actually both options, because in some cases the online option can help reduce the backlog and make the cases faster and more accessible for some people who can't travel easily. In other cases, there are people who have who don't have the technology, and I would agree 100% that should never be a barrier to having your case heard in any form of court or justice system.
Thank you. You get the last word on this.
We know that the Landlord and Tenant Board needs to be fixed, and we want to provide, we would provide appropriate funding to allow staffing to ensure that in-person hearings are available if that's what a person wants to have, and to make sure that the tenants and the landlords get prompt and fair hearings before the board in whatever manner they find appropriate.
Thank you. So we're going to move to the final pillar tonight. We've got housing. Poverty, we've got that on the table. How about our beautiful environment? Our beautiful Lake Simcoe, our beautiful, you know, the water around me, reminds me of Jamaica. I'm from Jamaica. I'm telling you, the water around us, fantastic. So we know that the panel, intergovernmental panel on climate change, has outlined that we have a little time to correct the things that we have done wrong and broken within our climate and our environment. So in order to have a livable planet for our future generations, you know, the young people coming up, our great grands and nieces, nephews, all of that. So one of their key recommendations is to better protect nature and restrict the urbanization of natural spaces. The fight between us and the environment, right? We have to live someplace, but we also have to be respectful of the environment. So Simcoe County is home to large and diverse agriculture and agri-business sectors, and we value them. Ontario's agriculture sector contributes more than $47 billion in GDP to the economy and supports over 860,000 jobs. That's no small thing. Only 5% of Ontario's land is fit for agricultural production, however. And between 1996 and 2016, Ontario lost 1.5 million acres of farmland to development, the equivalent of 175 acres per day. So, you know, Ontario's Greenbelt has had strong policies, and I think we all support the Greenbelt policies that restrict development in natural areas, as well as strong policies to protect farmland and nature. But what about us? What about Simcoe County? We'd like a Greenbelt. You know, we want to be part of that policy. So fossil fuel infrastructure, which includes highways, has a disastrous impact on our climate as well as on our communities. Lake Simcoe is showing signs of stress, and scientists predict that the lake could have toxic levels of salt within 40 years. So putting more highways around Lake Simcoe and through our greenbelt is incompatible with climate action and taking care of the lake. So my last 3 questions for you. We'll start with right here. Will you commit to stopping the construction of the Bradford bypass and the other greenbelt highways, Highway 413, Highway 404 extension around Lake Simcoe?
Yes. We intend to cancel wasteful projects, which include the 413 and the Bradford bypass, in addition to it just being the right thing to do for our environment, for our community, and for our economy. We will use that money to then turn around and invest in programs that will make life more affordable for families and for people in Ontario.
Thank you. Good.
I am 100% committed to stopping the construction of the Bradford bypass, Highway 14, and the 404 extension around Lake Simcoe. In fact, the Greens are committed to making it illegal to build any new highways through the Greenbelt. The truth of the matter is, we are in a climate crisis. Building new highways through the ecosystems that are vital to our protection against this crisis is reckless and frankly dangerous to our collective well-being. Not only do wetland ecosystems purify our water by filtering out contaminants, but they also help to reduce flooding. And when we destroy wetlands, like these highways would, the probability of a flood actually increases. To appeal to you from an economic perspective, why would we put our communities at risk of having to incur massive costs from flooding when these ecosystems are already saving us money by mitigating the risk in the first place?
Thank you. What do you say to that?
Well, thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
3 different highways and 3 different answers. And I want to be very upfront and accountable about exactly where we are in all 3 of them. I think you all know, first of all, we will cancel 413, period. We're going to take that $10 billion that's in the capital budget and invest it to eliminate the repair backlog in schools and help to fund 200 new schools. That is the direct choice that the Liberal Party is putting in our platform when it comes to 413. On Bradford Bypass, our commitment is to require it to go through a new environmental assessment process to understand what the impact will be on the lake, to look at the route, and subject it to modern environmental regulation. I cannot commit to canceling the construction of it because I can't tell you that that's how it will end up. I just want to be very upfront with you. That's the position of the party on the Bradford bypass. But I will tell you this. As mayor, we passed a resolution saying that we had deep concern around the environmental impact of Bradford bypass on Lake Simcoe, and I feel it is shameful that the government is relying on a 20-year-old environmental assessment that predates the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan that I was part of, many of you advocated for, to ram through this highway. And there are signs up already for a highway that has not even been through the full approvals process yet. That is wrong and the wrong way to build a highway. And the third one is this extension around Lake Simcoe. So this is not even a thing yet, but the government was quite happy to put a line on a map in its GTA, Golden Horseshoe Transportation Plan, that showed the extension of Highway 404 all the way up the southeast side of Lake Simcoe. No work has been done on this to see what the need is. No work has been done on it to see what the environmental impact would be, or even the feasibility of the route. But it made a nice line on a map if you're a government that believes in highways and wants to appeal to the voters of those ridings and the landowners who would benefit from the construction of the extension of 404 into that area. So we don't have a position on that because it hasn't even been brought forward yet. But I will tell you, I will fight against that highway absolutely as your MPP. I do not believe in it.
Thank you. The next question is, will you commit to expanding the Greenbelt into Simcoe County to protect our freshwater resources and farmland? I know you just finished, but we're starting with you.
Thank you. Absolutely. So when we started talking about our platform for protection of our environment and the plan to fight climate change, it starts with protecting more land. And if you read any of the great work that's been done about Lake Simcoe by some of the organizations who are sponsoring tonight's session, protecting natural cover, achieving a much higher percentage of natural cover in the Lake Simcoe watershed is one of the very best things we can do. We have wonderful natural areas in Simcoe County. Our party is committed to going from 10% of Ontario's land being protected as environmentally protected land to 30%. How will we do that? We will expand the Greenbelt. And I believe that, as we do that, we've committed to a science-based approach. As we do that, what we need to do is ensure that the lands that we are protecting are those that will prevent the greatest impact from development on our lake. When I was part of the Lake Simcoe Stakeholder Committee, when we were drafting the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, the pattern of development was such a key issue. Many of you in this room will remember the growth wars. We clearly have a government that believes in allowing sprawl again. And Ontario's Liberals have been responsible for developing not only the protection plan that now gives us clear targets and a path to improving the health of our lake. I was delighted to work on many of those initiatives as mayor, including the wastewater treatment plant, reducing the actual amount of effluent we put into the lake. But this is fundamentally about your approach to growing communities. And if you allow sprawl into Oro-Medonte and into Springwater, if you allow a pattern of development that continues to be fundamentally unsustainable, we will continue to damage our lake. We have specific commitments in our platform to protect more land, to expand the Greenbelt, and so I can confidently say yes to this one.
Thank you. We're going over to you at the end here.
Our platform commits to the expanding of the Greenbelt to include more vital spaces. Beyond that, it will be done with consultation, and it's important that our community ensures that our representative at Queen's Park will be a strong advocate to ensure that there is the inclusion of Simcoe County in these conversations and in these expansions.
Thank you.
I am committed to doubling the size of the Greenbelt to include a dedicated blue belt of protected watersheds, lakes, river systems, basins, and other freshwater resources, including the entirety of the Lake Simcoe and Nottawasaga watersheds. And it's also why I'm committed to placing a moratorium on all new gravel mining pits and any extensions of existing ones. These pits pose a massive risk to our water, which in turn also threatens the livelihood of our farmers, but we'll get to that in the next question.
Thank you. So we're down to the final question, and we're going to start back over here. And the question is, will you commit to agriculture and rural economic development to support the future of agriculture?
A strong agricultural sector means a stronger Ontario and stronger rural communities. Here are our commitments. An Ontario food strategy. We need to put healthy, locally sourced food into Ontario's tables. We need to support agricultural jobs in food processing, transportation, biofuel, and retail. Help young farm families and first-time farmers with mentorship, financial advice, and loan guarantees, and regulate gas prices to lower the cost of producing and shipping foods. We've got to stop paving over farmland because once farming is lost, it's lost forever. Therefore, we will implement a mandatory agricultural impact assessment that will be completed before any project takes place on agricultural land. We'll also support the Grocery Code of Conduct. Grocery stores have exercised a near monopoly and have used this to take advantage of food suppliers. We'll make this code a reality to improve transparency and fair dealings in the industry.
Thank you.
I am committed to supporting the future of agriculture by rewarding our farmers who are engaging in climate-smart farming, such as offering insurance discounts and other incentives to those who rebuild their soil health and participate in on-farm composting. and by protecting farmers against losses for up to 10 years as they transition from chemical agriculture to soil health agriculture. We also want to eliminate property tax penalties for farmers with small-scale, value-added production facilities on their farm, provide tax incentives for local food and beverage manufacturers who purchase inputs grown by local farmers, and fund a healthy farm-to-table school lunch program so our children can learn the value of food literacy. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from what I've said in the last few minutes regarding all of these questions, it's that protecting our climate can improve the economy. And to hit that point home, I want to leave you with a statement from a report on the cost of climate change from the Fiscal Accountability Office of Ontario. If the province takes no additional measures to adapt its buildings to climate change impacts, it'll have to spend at least $43 billion to maintain a state of good repair by the end of the century, and that is in the lowest emission climate scenario. If we continue on the current government's do-nothing approach to reducing greenhouse gases, that cost goes up to $116 billion. It's time we start realizing that protecting our environment is not just a social policy, and it's an economic one as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Final word on this question?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, I was up in Elmville several days last week and chatting with people in former Floss, talking about some of the challenges that they are facing, both living in the rural areas, but also, of course, continuing to farm. And I appreciate Bev bringing up the Grocery Code of Conduct. This is something that was very important to Ontario Liberals. We put in the platform as well. The mega companies are able to have conditions on their suppliers that are punitive. And we absolutely need to push back on behalf of Ontario's food suppliers, food producers, our family farmers, who are simply being outweighed in an unfair economic relationship. And the Grocery Code of Conduct is one tool to help combat that. But you know, what I heard as well is if we don't have the same services, if we don't have the same bandwidth, if we don't have the same support in rural areas as we do in urban areas, they will be disadvantaged for economic development. And that's fundamentally unfair. So the Liberal Party is committed to increasing bandwidth to rural areas. There are some great projects out there to do that already in Simcoe County, and provide services in smaller centers, public services in smaller centers. One other thing I wanted to talk about is regional processing capacity. This is something that, you know, it is a step in the fight against climate change by reducing the kind of transportation that is required to get food to market and get food to processors, but it also can create jobs, especially in rural areas. We would like to bring in new programs to build regional processing capacity for food so that we can bring the product to market, but much more importantly, from farm to processing much more closer to home, and closer to the people who know those foods, know those products, and know how to build that processing capacity as well. I do think there's an important piece to state here, though, which is that if we believe, and we should, in our ability for rural communities to grow their economies, again, we have to commit to providing the same level of services to them. We have to have government that believes that people should have the same level of services regardless of the area that they are in. And I heard this time and again. I heard from people in Elmville who are challenged to build their businesses because daycare, impossible to find. Before school care, impossible to find. They are concerned about the future of their school and fought so hard to keep it. We need a government that is committed to those services because it is vital. Basic public services are vital to the health of a community and supporting economic development. So it starts with the choice, which I think this election is about, between a government that believes in public services and one that doesn't.
Thank you. And thank you to the three candidates for answering our three-pillared questions. So I'm going to turn now to the questions from our audience. Some of the questions are related to some of the ones that we've already asked, but this is coming from the audience, their words, and we would like to honor that. So the first question is a little bit of a preamble. Low-income residents have struggled with delayed court systems, EI and CERB overpayments, increased family law domestic violence issues, and evictions. So legal aid funding was reduced by 30% in 2018. I think we heard that. So what commitment will be made to increase legal aid funding? And you don't have a lot of time, so you have a minute to be succinct and to the point, and also engage us. Okay, so we're going to start down here.
Absolutely committed to increasing legal aid funding. And, you know, again, once you get into a system where you've got a backlog, then you need even more, and people are even more unfairly disadvantaged. You know, the legal aid is such a fundamental and basically important piece in our system. Again, it's about fairness for all residents of Ontario, and I would absolutely support increasing the funding for legal aid.
Thank you. Here in the middle.
Absolutely. As I mentioned in the housing portion earlier, the Greens will fund Legal Aid Ontario to support tenants who are wrongly evicted, face discrimination, or have been forced into unsafe living conditions. Our full costed platform is coming out tomorrow, so the specific numbers of where you can find that will be there tomorrow, so I really do recommend you take a look at that.
Thank you. And over to you.
Everybody in Ontario deserves access to justice, and there's been years of underfunding and cuts which has caused really major court delays. And it's our commitment to reverse Doug Ford's cuts to legal aid and to start to fix the inadequacies within Ontario's legal aid system. We'll increase funding for summary legal advice, unbundled legal services, and public interest litigation, and ensure that more people will qualify for legal aid assistance, and will work with legal aid to provide appropriate supports.
Thank you. Our next question is around the linkages between healthcare, poverty, and homelessness, right? So the three, how do you propose to tie these together? You know, we heard how big these issues are, how complex these issues are, but they are intersectional issues. So how do we, you know, expect the three of you to tie them together to get to a solution? We're going to start here at the end. With you?
So in my many years working as a frontline worker with people who were receiving social assistance, the principles of Maslow's hierarchy of needs really motivated me to start taking a look at what was at the root of the person's personal circumstances that got in the way of them being able to be successful in exiting the system. And one of the things that I found was that people didn't feel safe. So housing is vital to people's ability to exit poverty, safe, stable, and affordable housing. The next step is they have to be healthy. And fixing our healthcare system so that people have access to appropriate care, pharmacare, dental care, and mental health treatment, in addition to all other health services, is vitally important, I believe, to helping people exit poverty.
Thank you.
So I think the answer to linking these three things is making sure that the supports are available on site. So in supportive housing projects, making sure that there are psychologists on site, there are addiction support specialists on site, there are employment services on site in the locations that these people are living and can access to on a more frequent basis. And I think the other part of this has to do with ending discrimination in the healthcare system. From my time in Ottawa, when I would attend rallies that were organized by the homeless community, one of the things we would hear time and time again is people going to seek medical care but being turned away because they were not believed, that they had ulterior motives for being there in the first place. So we really need to implement a strategy to ensure that there is no discrimination in our healthcare system regarding people who are homeless while they try to seek out these services. That needs to end.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I talked about this in my introduction because this is so fundamental to the approach that we take to human services. We don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system. We need to provide alternatives to hospitalization so that people can get care in the kind of environments that they need. Do we need to expand RVH in Barrie? Absolutely, we're in a growing community. We will need to grow our hospital. But we need to grow alternatives to hospital environments. And I'll tell you, one of the very best things we can do is supportive housing. When you talk about those intersecting crises, it's exactly right, Claudine, that the very best environment I think that we have created to help with the intersecting crises of mental health, addictions, poverty, and homelessness is supportive housing communities, or our supportive housing communities. And I will be a relentless advocate for that. We built the Barrie Health Accord in Barrie with the county, the Barrie Police Service, Public Health, and the hospital to bring these crises together. Nobody else has done that before in any other city, where we brought a hospital, a police service, and municipalities, social service agencies together to try and create an upstream approach where we try and get people help before they're in crisis. That's the approach I think we need in government.
Thank you. This next question, I believe you have answered it, but we wouldn't mind you committing again. Will you commit to fund a program to increase the quantity and quality of transition and supportive housing?
Let me just keep going. As I was saying.
Yes or no?
Big time, yes.
Yes?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you said transitional, so can I just say a quick word about that, since that's
Go
a new
ahead.
piece? You know, one of the challenges we've got this incredible organization in Barrie Redwood Park Communities that has championed transitional housing and the need for it. They shouldn't be alone. We should have lots of partners helping them to grow, helping to grow the supply across a spectrum. You know, emergency housing and homelessness supports is, of course, a spectrum. And earlier it was asked, emergency and long-term solutions. And shelter is, you know, we in Barrie brought in 100%, no fees, no charges whatsoever when you're building emergency housing. I mean, we've taken these kinds of steps at a local level to try and support creating more. But we need a provincial government that believes in this and understands that housing supports and the transition from emergency shelters, whether you're in the women and children shelter or a mission or otherwise, and trying to get into housing, it requires that housing first approach. It requires a series of different types of housing steps, and it requires a comprehensive strategy, none of which we have seen over the last 4 years, but which I am passionate about delivering for this community.
Thank you. Middle?
Yes, I will absolutely recommit to that, and I'll reiterate that we plan to build 60,000 supportive housing units and to repair 260 community housing units and increase funding specifically towards women's shelters as well as transitional and permanent supporting housing for women and their families to make sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, specifically in our women's platform, we want to ensure that we are properly funding women's shelters and transitional housing to ensure that the services and the programs that are necessary to help women recover from intimate partner violence and abuse are readily available. And then, as I had mentioned earlier in our housing platform, there is a commitment through our Homes You Can Afford plan to ensure that there is transitional housing available, and I think the number was 30,000. I tried to say 300,000, which is why I remember. Houses available.
Thank you. We're going to move to the second last question. So, will you commit to having the province recognize housing as a human right? Start here. Yes or no? Will you commit?
Definitely. The Ontario New Democratic Party's platform around housing is solidly based on that principle, and I believe I made that quite clear in my comments. It's vitally important that people get what they need to be safe in their home, and safe includes knowing that it's stable. And that's very much a commitment for the New Democratic Party and a commitment that I am passionate about.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you the same answer.
I wanted to make sure. Succinct, right?
Anything else?
Succinct.
Yes, absolutely. It is right in our platform. It's written into our platform.
Absolutely.
Housing
Thank
is a
you.
human right.
So the final question from our audience, and this one, thank you.
Our penultimate question.
Okay, great. So the second last question. Ontario nuclear power plants are coming to the end of their lives. Replacing them with natural gas will massively increase carbon emissions. What is your plan to transition our energy system to low carbon? Great question. Great question.
Great question.
Yes.
I really appreciate this. So we used to have smog days in Ontario. Remember that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I do too. I remember the brown haze when you drove into Toronto. We got rid of coal-fired power. It was one of the greatest accomplishments of an Ontario Liberal government in the last 20 years. The continued transition away from fossil fuels is absolutely necessary. And I will be the first to admit there were problems with the Green Energy Plan. But boy, did we learn a lot. And some of it was very successful. It is very clear that if we replace the downtime at Darlington and Bruce and Pickering with fossil fuels, we're talking about 100 times more emissions when those peaker plants are online than with the system where we replace it with renewables. So, notwithstanding, there are certainly lessons that need to have been learned from the initial attempts in the Green Energy Plan. It is absolutely essential that our energy production in this province continue to move away from fossil fuels. And the answer of replacing it with more natural gas is absolutely unacceptable to the Ontario Liberal Party.
Thank you. You can go next.
The Green Party absolutely agrees that natural gas is not the answer. Regarding our nuclear energy power plants, we don't want to shut down any of the ones that are currently in function, but we do not want to build any new ones. At the moment, we really believe that we need to invest in solar, wind, geothermal, and other forms of renewable energy to ensure that our transition towards fossil fuels is based around those.
Thank you.
I mean, sorry. Our plan is the Ontario NDP has a bold and practical plan to address the urgency of the climate crisis, which includes moving away from fossil fuels and you know what? I don't have an answer for you, but I'm not well prepared for that question, so I'm not gonna try and pretend I am. I can get an answer for you, and I will get that answer available for anyone who wants to connect with me. I will meet you at my desk at the end of the meeting, and I'll get your information and I'll pass the information on. Thank you. I'm just not really going to say what I don't know for sure.
I can respect that answer. I can absolutely respect that answer.
Yep.
Thank you. And the last question, going once. So this is from the Barrie Today News. I have to make sure that's out there. We saw this morning a very powerful exhibit on Lakeshore. I think you mentioned that drive, where 150 tents were erected by the Busby Center and Elizabeth Fry. Those tents will be used by the 150 people about to be displaced when the hotel emergency shelter systems end. Question comes from someone this individual spoke to that uses the Busby Center. Housing crisis and affordable housing are now buzzwords that people tune out. Tell me straight up how you're going to get us off the street now and talk to me like I have no idea what you're talking about, but understand I know more than you because I'm living it. So plain language, please, and don't try and fool any of us because we are not going to be fooled. So tell us what your answer is, and we'll start here at the front.
So this is really difficult because the fact is that the system that we are working with as a community now has had a lot of Band-Aid solutions over the last 10 or 15 years. And now we're here, and we've got this situation in front of us where there was this Band-Aid pocket of money that was a short-term solution. And what I'm hearing is that there is, in fact, no exit strategy. There is no plan. All of a sudden, the funding is not there. So, my earliest remarks in my opening, in my first opening around affordability and social assistance was we're relying more and more on charities to stop the gaps in the social safety net, and that's not okay. We need to come up with programs that create a wraparound approach with stabilized funding and solutions that are going to ensure that we don't end up with this problem again. I'm getting the red card.
Thank you.
And I didn't answer the question. Sorry.
You got the.
I think the answer lies in part about the question where the person states that this is their lived experience. They know best about how to tackle this crisis. So I think it's not just about talking at people about what we can do to fix their problems, but sitting down at the table with our houseless neighbors and saying, what is the immediate solution that you need, and doing that on an individual basis. And I think that also, especially in short term, means that we as individuals need to be out in the community asking what we can do to support, whether that's making meals for someone who might need it, or providing a space in our own homes. Obviously, those aren't the long-term solutions. We need to build these supportive housing units, but immediately, I think we need to build and develop our compassion and work with these communities.
Thank you. You get the final word.
Straight up answer.
Yep.
We're going to buy a hotel. We're going to turn it into supportive housing. We need at least
Honestly,
yeah.
right?
And we're going to have Empower Simcoe provide some of the wraparound services. We're going to have other community agencies provide wraparound services. We're going to create a community of individuals who have experienced homelessness, who can support each other in the journey, in their journey to fight their root causes, the reasons for being homeless. But we're going to buy a hotel. The straight up answer: buy a hotel, convert it to supportive housing apartments, and create the services and supports on site for the people who will otherwise be forced to live on the street. You want to know why I'm running for provincial office? Because I've been trying to get this done for a couple of years. And it drives me nuts that we've seen other communities get that investment. We have not seen the investment in our own community. It's not just parochialism, folks. It's about their approach, this government's approach. If you do not believe in helping people with the basic services they need, then you are not going to make those kinds of investments. I believe in them. I've been the champion for them. We've done what we could at this local level. I want to be your MPP to try and make it happen on a bigger scale here in Barrie.
Thank you. Well, what do we say after all of this? Well, thank you very much to each of the candidates for attending tonight's Candidates Accountability Assembly, and to the organizing committees that we spoke about before: SCADA, Simcoe County Poverty Reduction Task Group, Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, the Simcoe County Food Council, and Kairos. Yes, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Does anybody know if Downey is okay? Is he running in the election?
From what we understand, sir, he is okay. I think he's running. I believe he is. However, Doug, he's not here today. So, yes, I believe he is running. He was invited, yes. So, great conversation, or great responses, not a conversation, great responses to questions that are very meaningful and, important to our community. And we thank you for being thoughtful in putting your responses together. We thank you for thinking about what the people need versus what your party needs. And we appreciate if you keep that in the front of your mind, that it's about the people, not the party. And we appreciate you doing what you did tonight. So we also want to thank Reverend Susan Eagle and to Grace United Church for hosting us. And I just want to say one more thing to the audience. You need to make sure you educate yourself. Take up the offers of picking up information that's out there, the platforms that are coming out, things that are printed. Make sure you know what is being offered. Make sure you can understand, and if you meet candidates again in the community, be able to ask them questions again that might pop up when you go to sleep at night. It's 3 in the morning, you're going, right? So make sure you do that, and because if you don't get informed, you can't make an informed choice. And please go out and vote. Your voice is so important. Your vote is so important. We fought a long way and hard time to get the vote, so we want to make sure we get out and vote. So thank you again, and I wish you a good night.
No closing statement?
For being here for my first debate. It was interesting. I actually prepared two-minute conversations on the 3 questions. So if I struggled, I'll know another time. Anyways, having said that, one of the things I want to ensure you know is there's a comprehensive NDP platform. On the desk I have out there, there's several cards, and each card represents a portion of our platform that as it relates to healthcare, education, housing, affordability, taxation, governance. So there's a lot of information out there. You've heard a lot from us tonight, and I want to make sure that when it comes time for you to vote, you have the information that in this brief time I may not have been able to share. So I think it's really important that our plan for the NDP is about investing and investing wisely. That's our focus. We want to take we want to take the time to make sure our communities are as well as they can be, which means investing. And investing must be done wisely in ensuring that there's a fix for what is systemically wrong. As we move forward with change, we need to make sure that there's meaningful consultation with stakeholders who include those who access and deliver programs and services. And with that, I think it's really important that we have conversations together, and together we can fix what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
It has been an honor to be here with you tonight to share some of the Green Party's vision for this province. If you are interested in learning more, I recommend you check out our full costed platform, which is being released on gpo.ca tomorrow morning. One day, we're all going to look back at our lives and see the impacts of the choices we've made. When that day comes for me, I hope I can tell my future grandchildren that I did everything I could to build them a better world. A world that is built upon the principles of justice, of equity, and of compassion. A world rich in biodiversity and free of fossil fuels. And a world where we look out for one another, not because we seek rewards or praise, but because we know that community care makes all of us better. When you go to the polls on June 2nd, think about what world you want to have helped build when you are looking back on your life. Then cast your vote. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Bev and Elise for being here. And obviously, we share many values and commitments. I got to say this. Being for the people means showing up. And it troubles me. It troubles me because the government has not shown up when we needed them to over the last 4 years. But what we want to talk about and what we should be talking about in this election is our plan for the future. What are we going to do differently? What are we specifically proposing to do to tackle these huge and intersectional crises that are facing our communities, whether it is climate change or whether it is housing and homelessness, mental health and addictions, and so forth. We've put out our platform as a party. It is on our website. It is fully costed. I really hope you will go and see the ideas that we are proposing, but most of all, I hope you will see in it a very different vision for the province. And I want to speak directly to all of you. This riding can have a progressive MPP. I want to be your MPP for Barrie-Springwater-Oro-Medonte because I believe I can take the experience of 12 years of leadership in this community, take it to Queen's Park, and get things done on the issues that we have talked about tonight. And I want to do that for you to create a better future for our kids, for our community. I'm troubled by what I've seen over the last 4 years, but most of all, I do see the opportunity. Our Liberal Party candidates, we have a very diverse group of people from a wide range of backgrounds, including medical experts, including nurses, workers, doctors, teachers, people who represent all cultural communities in our province. Please check us out. Take a look at the people who are proposing to be the next government for Ontario, but most of all, what we stand for. And I really want to say this to you too. You can vote now, by the way, not just on June 2nd. You can walk into the returning office at the Bayfield Mall and vote today. Advance polls start in a week, but I need your support. We can bring a progressive vision to this province. We can bring a better future for our community, and I want to be part of that with your support. So thank you very much for having us tonight.
Thank you once again to our candidates, and thank you to our audience for being here. And don't forget that there are a number of collateral material on tables out in the foyer that you can pick up and get information on the various candidates' platforms and or information that tells you how to access their platforms online.
And thank you to our moderator tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.